Good afternoon. I'm Kim Knox, president of the League of Women Voters of San Diego. I'd like to welcome our new members that are here today. Thank you for joining us. And I'd also like to appreciate those of you who made a donation when you registered for today's event. All right. The League of Women Voters of San Diego is a nonpartisan grassroots organization that supports and opposes issues, but not candidates or parties. We make nonpartisan endorsements on ballot measures based on League principles and current League program positions. Today's event is entitled Trash Talk: Why San Diegans Should Vote Yes on Measure B. The League supports Measure B because it believes that consumers must expect to pay some of the costs of waste management and that the government should maintain an equitable system of taxation. Allowing owners of single-family homes to be exempt from a fee while everyone else pays creates a basic inequity. The League also supports policies to reduce the generation of trash and to promote reuse and recycling. We have 3 speakers today, and I'll introduce all of them before they begin speaking. So, Sean Ela Rivera represents San Diego's 9th City Council District. Prior to being elected council president last year, he served as chair of the Environment Committee. His previous experience includes being an elected member of the San Diego Community College District Board of Trustees and the executive director of Youth Will. He got his JD from California Western School of Law. Lauren Casares serves as a policy advisor at the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce, focusing on environment and sustainability, small business, economic development, cannabis, and broadband across the greater San Diego region. Prior to her role at the Chamber, Lauren was the Director of Scheduling and Administration for Mayor Todd Gloria. She earned her bachelor's degree in political science and women's studies at Point Loma Nazarene University. Michael Zuchet has been General Manager of the San Diego Municipal Employees Association since 2009. He previously served as council member of San Diego's 2nd District from 2002 to 2005 and as deputy mayor in 2005. Mike has degrees in business economics and environmental studies from UC Santa Barbara and a master's degree in environmental economics from Duke University. He worked as a renewable energy economist in the U.S. Department of Energy and has been president of the San Diego League of Conservation Voters. As a reminder, you have cards. Please fill them out if you have any questions. We'll be taking those after the 3 presentations. All right, Sean Ela Rivera.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you for having me, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for for hosting us today and for supporting Measure B and its route to becoming a ballot measure and getting it on the ballot. It was very, very much supported, Kim. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the history of the People's Ordinance, how we got to the place that we're in right now, some of the values that are driving my desire to see this ordinance reformed, and what I think San Diegans can expect if we were able to get this passed in November. So super high level, I want you all to know kind of the framework that I try to approach all of my decisions through, and that is creating a San Diego where everyone has an opportunity to fulfill their potential. So really putting the framework in place for a city that invests in its people and gives people from all backgrounds and all communities an opportunity to thrive. That is front and center. Every decision I make gets filtered through that sort of prioritization. So for years I've heard about something called the People's Ordinance. The People's Ordinance, most of you probably know, but if you don't, is an ordinance that's been on the books for over 100 years. Since way back when San Diego was still a pretty small town, had about 75,000 people at the time, and the big controversy of the day was trash being sold to pig farmers. And that controversy led to what at the time probably made a lot of sense, but 100 plus years later does not serve the city very well. And it's a rule that requires the city to not just provide refuse collection to homes throughout the city, or for city workers to do that work, that's all fine. But eventually prohibited the city from recovering any of the costs for that service. And that might sound like a great thing for the average San Diegan who wants to be charged anything, but it's not, because, and for a variety of reasons. The first is it really limits the services that we can provide. We are very restricted in what we can provide to folks because we simply are not bringing in the revenue necessary to support excellent services. We kind of have to do a pretty bare bones approach to trash collection. It requires us to kind of nickel and dime people for their service. So if you live in a single family home and you've received trash collection services and you've had a bin broken or need to be replaced, I'm watching some eyes roll right now. You know how frustrating that is, and that's not how it is in most cities. And that's simply because we can't afford to do anything besides what we're required to do, and we're locked into this box that was basically created 100 years ago. The second issue is that it is not a good law to have on the books with respect to sustainability. Again, we're operating in a system that was built 100 plus years ago, well before we were thinking about things like recycling or organics, diversion. Climate change was not something that was on the top of people's minds when they were voting on this in the 19-teens. And the third issue is fairness. The independent budget analysts put this in, I think, a very succinct way. And they said that the People's Ordinance creates a two-tier system where some residents receive a service and others don't. And there's an issue with that. There's, I think, a fundamental issue around fairness. Everybody in the city pays property taxes, either through the payments that they make for their home or through the rent that they pay. I'm a renter. I do not think that my landlord is just writing off the property taxes and just through his benevolence and goodwill for his tenants. It gets passed through to tenants, obviously. So we're all paying our property taxes, but what we are receiving from the city varies, and it varies because of this old law that's on the books. For years, this has been pointed out by folks like the League of Women Voters, 3 county grand juries, and the independent budget analyst as a real flawed system that creates barriers to equity, to sustainability, and as we mentioned before, also makes it very difficult to deliver excellent service. It also has a huge impact on our budget. So somewhere to the tune of $50+ million a year from our general fund gets consumed by the requirement or the prohibition on recovering costs for trash collection. City of San Diego is completely unique in this, and I think Lauren's going to talk a little bit more about this, but when I say completely unique, I mean like completely unique. There's no other city in the region that has this sort of prohibition on the books, no other city in the state, and from our estimates, I think Mike, you looked at this as well, nobody else in the country. I will share that last week I was at a convening with other council presidents from large cities throughout the country, and I mentioned this to them, and their eyes were like, bulging out of their heads, and they were really, really, like, they didn't even know how to process it. They said, we would go bankrupt if we couldn't, and they were like, how do you do that? And it was like, well, it doesn't work well. This is why we're trying to change it. But it's taken a long time, and it's been pointed out time and time again, but it's been considered this third rail issue in San Diego politics, and folks have largely stayed away from it. But I told you my values around wanting to make sure that San Diego is a place that creates opportunity for everyone. And I try to really approach my job through that perspective with an additional commitment to believing that fine is not good enough when it comes to delivery of services for San Diegans, that we should strive for more than fine. I think many of us see San Diego as a place that can be or is a world-class city, and I think that the services that you deserve as residents should align with that. I believe deeply in the importance of acting with urgency to address the contributing factors of climate change. And we know that with our current system, it's difficult to divert waste in an effective way, in the sort of way that we need to effectively address those climate issues. Mike, I was listening to your background. I think the merger, the kind of cross-section of environment and economics is a really good cross-section actually for this issue. We talked about the budgetary impacts. Climate impacts are huge. Methane is like a climate change accelerant, and we are not able to divert the waste from landfills that creates those methane emissions in the way that we could if we had the funding to provide for a proper system. And then obviously, I've talked to you about my commitment to fairness and equity. So there's another thing that I want to make sure that I address because I think this kind of slips through the cracks. So let's say you don't want to be charged a dime, which I totally understand. Most people don't want to pay one more cent than they're already paying for trash. Why should you support Measure B? Well, first of all, Measure B doesn't actually impose a fee. It just simply removes the prohibition in such a way that allows the city to step back, engage the community, and start to talk about what we want moving forward. But it also, by stepping back and kind of untying our hands, allows us to operate in the 21st century, which we're not able to do right now. So, as you might imagine, the fine people of San Diego in 1918 were not anticipating Airbnb or VRBO or ADUs when they put this law on the books. And as the law is currently written, you can operate what is effectively a de facto hotel out of a home and not pay a cent for trash. And the city's prohibited from recovering those costs. That's not right. So, again, even if you don't want to pay a dime, which I understand, most of us can agree that we need to put something on the books that would allow us to recover costs from people who are exploiting that loophole. And they're doing that on the backs of San Diegans who are subsidizing that through our general fund. The other thing is, we mentioned ADUs, and in my district, in the college area, we have what are often referred to as mini dorms. So we have a system in place that does not in any way discourage people from producing a lot of waste. So I want you to think about the wildest, most crazy frat party you can imagine in the SDSU area and the amount of trash that would be produced from that home on a given weekend. A lot, right? And we can't charge a cent for no matter how much trash they put out there. That's a problem. That's a problem from a financial sustainability perspective. It's a problem from an environmental sustainability perspective. And it's because we're operating quite literally in the early part of the 20th century when it comes to the rules that are applied to the city when it comes to refuse collection. So, wanted to provide some context setting. I also want to let you know this, that when we're not trying to hide the ball here. We're not repealing people's ordinance, we're amending it. We're amending it to allow for cost recovery. The next step in the process, if this were to pass, would be a robust study, which is required by state law. We are only allowed to charge folks for the services they're receiving, not a dime more, not a cent more. It has to be directly related to the service that's provided. And it would take quite some time to put that in place. We would have to go through that process. We'd want to engage the community. We'd want to find out what additional services people want. Do you want weekly recycling instead of every other week? Many people do. Do you want bulk item pickup on a quarterly basis? Most people do. We can't afford to do any of that right now. My district office has organized around 50 community cleanups at this point where we've had dumpsters brought in. And we've done that in partnership with some of our private haulers, private trash haulers, but that's not a system. A system is not one where we're asking people to donate bins and scrambling to figure out a way to get people to, every so often throw their bulk items away. A system is one where you can count on, right? Is every 3 months or every 6 months, the city's gonna place a dumpster in this location in my community and I'm gonna be able to throw away the big things that we wanna get rid of. They're not going to end up in our canyons or on the end of a street because people don't have another way to get rid of it. We want to put that sort of system in place. We want to find out what you all want, what you would consider the sort of services that would meet your expectations as San Diegans, and build and build a program that corresponds to that. And the last thing I want to mention, which is incredibly important, especially right now during a time where inflation is through the roof and people are really struggling to get by, where we see seniors as the fastest growing group of people who are becoming homeless, is the impact in terms of cost. That's not lost on us. So there's nothing prohibiting us from putting programs in place to ensure that we are mitigating the impacts on seniors and low-income families. We won't be prohibited from doing any of that. What we are simply doing is untying the city's hands in a way that was set in place, again, over 100 years ago, so the city of San Diego can move into the 21st century, so we can provide residents with world-class services, so we can do that in an environmentally sustainable way and a financially responsible way. That's why I've been so passionate about this. We've been very, very appreciative of Councilmember LaCava's leadership and support on this issue as well. Why we've built a huge coalition of supporters in support of Measure B, and why I think it'll be such a game changer for San Diego if we get this passed in November. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you, Council President. Thank you, League of Women Voters, for inviting me today. So I'm here to bring the Chamber of Commerce perspective. Just for a little background, we have over 2,500 member businesses throughout the San Diego and Tijuana region. We have a PAC that takes stances on certain measures and candidates, but in addition to that, we have our committees throughout, much like councils do. So Sustainability and Industry Committee is the committee that one of the committees that I staff, and the committee where this started. So we actually looked at supporting this starting about a year ago when then council member, now council president, Ela Rivera, and council member LaCava started talking about this, started having this conversation. And we found that this was going to be something that was quite frankly easy to support, and I hope that everything that I share with you today, you come to the same conclusion that this is a pretty easy measure to understand and pretty easy measure to support. So want to say we are so grateful for Council President Ela Rivera and Councilmember LaCava and all of their leadership that they've taken on this. It is obviously not glamorous. We're talking about garbage. And it's something that I think some people see as a smaller issue. It's not the housing, it's not transportation, it's not these hot button issues, but this is really critical that we pass this fall so that we can again untangle the city's hands and make it easier for us to do a lot of things that I'm going to touch on. I want to first start by saying so the People's Ordinance was originally enacted in 1919, but when it was enacted in 1919, it was actually so that San Diego, the city, was put in charge of garbage pickup, solid waste pickup, and disposal. It did not specify if it was going to be a free service or a paid service. The city never ended up enacting a fee or a tax for this. And then in 1981 and 1986, it was amended to specify that residents living in single-family homes were entitled to no fee trash pickup. So what this ordinance is doing is fixing the original ordinance, but also fixing the changes that were made in the 1980s that made this explicitly inequitable and explicitly unfair. So I just want to make sure that is clear. Again, we're not repealing the ordinance, we're making it equitable for everyone within our great city. So as the leading voice for the business community, we're really proud to support Measure B in the city of San Diego. We supported it when it came to the council earlier this year. In July, we urged the City Council to approve the proposal, and we were really glad to see it approved. And when Measure B passes, the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce is committed to working with city staff, as we do with everything that's relevant to our business owners and to our residents, to create a more equitable solid waste system and make sure that the fee that is charged is equitable, fair, and of course reasonable to all of us. So I'll give a little background. So each of our cities, the 18 cities in our county, have done this at different points in time. It was either 2002 or 2003 when the city of La Mesa, where I live and I grew up, made it so that there was a fee for trash pickup. The way that it works today, my parents are single family homeowners and they pay about $20 a month for, at that point, a family of 4 for our garbage pickup. We get our cans replaced, and we have garbage, the green bins, and recycling. And we have ever since that came in place. The way it works for me, I'm a condominium owner, just my own, and so I'm in a homeowners association. It comes out of my homeowners association fees each month because we share large bins for it. It is not noticeable. It is a very small amount. It is not what a majority of my HOA fees are going to. Again, it's not noticeable for single family homeowners in La Mesa, and we are a significantly smaller city. So the impact that it has on our city is not comparable to the massive impact that it will have on San Diego after Measure B passes, after there is robust outreach. I trust, and the Chamber of Commerce trust Council President Elo Rivera, we trust Councilmember LaCava, we trust our council to take this very seriously, and it's state mandated that they do this outreach that Council President was talking about. So this outreach is going to look a lot of different ways, but I imagine there will be robust community input from residents. I know the Chamber of Commerce, we are ready to give our recommendations. The Chamber of Commerce is not going to be supporting a measure that is going to aimlessly tax or aimlessly charge citizens of San Diego. I don't think any of you have ever seen the Chamber of Commerce come out and say, we're really excited about a fee. So we are supporting this because it's not a new tax. Don't listen to Carl DeMaio or anyone else who is telling you that it's new tax or who is telling you that you already pay for the fee through your taxes, your property taxes. You're not. Your property taxes go into the general fund. So most of you probably know what the general fund is, but I'll touch on it a little bit. General fund revenues cover a whole wide variety of things throughout our city. If you look at the budget that they passed, you can get some nitty-gritty on what it goes to. But a massive portion of the general fund goes to critically needed city services. So that's our public libraries, like we're sitting in right now. That's our public parks. And that's all of our public safety officers. That is fire, police, lifeguards. So when we're keeping out $50 to $80 million, depending on the estimate, from the general fund, we are underfunding all of those services in San Diego. It makes it tough to hire people. It makes it tough to maintain employees at the city. And if we don't have employees doing the work at the city, your services are worse off. And it might even feel sometimes like your property taxes, you're wondering where they're going. Maybe it's because there's not enough to fund these services. So some estimates are looking at it being about $23 to $29 a month. So roughly $25, roughly $300 annually. It's not going to be $300 up front. This would be a monthly fee. There's also options in this when they're doing these studies, when they hire the professional consultants to come and figure out what makes sense for the city of San Diego, what makes sense for residents. And so one of those options is variable rate pricing, and I have notes somewhere here. So variable rate pricing would make it so that you would pay to play, if you will. You would put your trash in the garbage, you would put your compost in your compost bins, that would be, again, city provided, and your recycling in your recycling bins. All these bins would be city provided. And the amount that you put in each bin is what you pay for each option. So it encourages people. It's been studied and found that is the easiest way to encourage people to compost and recycle. It's gonna be easy on all of you because the bins will be provided. And again, this is not necessarily how they're going to do it, but it's an option, variable rate pricing. This would be really good for our environment because we are able to, again, encourage people to compost, encourage people to recycle, and we're already falling behind in the city and really in all of our cities in San Diego County with our composting programs. It is state mandated that we compost at this time, that businesses compost, that the city and city facilities compost, and there are free bins. People are not using them very much. We're behind on getting them out to people because we are underfunded and understaffed, and it is not going to change unless we have the funding, we have the staff, and people have a good reason to put things in their compost. The argument, again, that single-family homeowners already pay for their trash pickup through property taxes, that's just fallacy. It is simply not true. There is no designated tax at this time. There is no designated fee. When this does pass, after all of the robust community engagement, they will come up with a system that works. They will come up with a system that makes it easier for all of us, that will make it faster. Ideally, there will be less missed trash pickups that certainly happen because of staffing issues throughout the city. And so overall, this is just, it's good for business, it's good for residents, and it's really great for city services. So one more thing that I'll touch on is the grand jury, the one in 2008 and 2009. Again, there's been 3 so far. So the grand jury concluded that the ordinance has outlived 21st century society. So there are 3 primary reasons that they outlined for that reason. So providing some residents no fee trash services while forcing others to pay an additional fee is inequitable. It does not provide incentives for citizens to recycle and reduce the amount of trash generated. And its repeal would free up funds currently needed for the city's cash-starved general fund. A reminder, the city of San Diego got a lot of money from the American Rescue Plan Act because of COVID. We are not always going to be able to be bailed out like that. So Council President Ela Rivera, our council members, Mayor Todd Gloria are working really hard on these budgets to make sure that our city can operate in a way that is good for all of us, can operate in a way that we're not having to raise your property taxes or anything like that. But those funds will not always come. So they are in a very sticky situation because of past decisions by city councils and past mayors. And they are doing everything in their power to pull us out. This is an excellent way for us to fund the city, fund public safety, fund parks, fund everything that makes San Diego the best place to live and work. Yes, that's the Chamber's slogan. But just in closing, in 2021, IBA said this quote, "This service is one of the only services paid for by the general fund that confers an exclusive benefit onto only a subset of residents. By doing so, we are draining millions and millions of dollars of critically needed funds from our parks, our libraries, and we are doing it inequitably." So the Chamber has seriously considered this proposal at every level, through our committees, through our policy committees. We are committed to, once this does pass, giving robust input, helping with public input, so that this is fair, so that is a reasonable charge, and so that it guarantees that our critically needed services are being funded. So as written, the ordinance is unfair, it's bad for our environment, it's bad for our city, it's bad for our residents, it is bad policy. So It's time to trash the people's ordinance.
Thank you. My name is Michael Zucat. I'm the General Manager of the San Diego Municipal Employees Association, and we also want to just begin by thanking the League of Women Voters not only for hosting this forum today, but for your engagement on this most recent discussion of the People's Ordinance over the last year or so, and over the last couple of decades, as was noted by the earlier speakers. Thank you for that engagement. I am believe all of the most important points have been covered, so I'm going to be fairly brief, emphasize a few, and then we can get on to questions and more discussion on aspects of this that you would like to discuss. I do have to begin sort of where Lauren left off, which is the equity piece of this. I just sort of want to give an example to just sort of bring it home. This is the only general fund service that is available to about half the population and not available to the other half of the population. So the obvious sort of analogy would be if you were to call 911 today and the dispatcher said, well, what's your emergency, and is it at a single family house or is it at an apartment? And if you answered it's an apartment and the dispatcher said, well, I'm sorry, you're on your own. Obviously that's an absurd situation, but that's exactly the way it is with refuse collection in the city of San Diego. And so that's clearly, it's beyond inequitable, it's just absurd. And so there may be different views about how it should be fixed, but it seems hard for a reasonable person to say that, yeah, that sounds like a good system. So I also did want to appreciate the Council President, Shawnila Rivera, and Joe LaCava, Councilmember LaCava, who have sort of been leaders on this. The Council President mentioned this sort of a third rail issue in politics, meaning for at least the last 40 years, elected officials have been essentially telling San Diegans that no, we're the city of San Diego. We do things differently than everybody else, and we're better than them, and we know better, and we do better. I think it's notable that nobody does it this way, not in the county, not in the state, not in the United States of America. And there's some good reasons for that, as have been articulated. And so for Sean and Joe to sort of elevate this issue and to have this discussion, I think deserves a lot of credit, because, they're, on the sort of lowest common denominator of the politics of talking about money. This is something that, San Diego hasn't typically rewarded elected officials who stick their head above the water on these types of issues. But this is so sort of fundamental that, the Council President and Joe LaCava said, no, we're going to do that. And what happened? This amazing coalition came out of business, labor, the environmental community, the League of Women Voters, other good government organizations said, you know what, you're right, it's time. And so anyway, credit to them for bringing this discussion, putting this to the voters, and for the City Council, the majority of which voted to put this on the ballot, to have this discussion. There was some mention of the environmental aspects of this, and Sean mentioned the notion that he and others at the city would like to do more for climate change initiatives, for methane gas reduction, reducing the amount of waste that goes to a landfill, which, by the way, we will all ultimately pay for if we don't reduce that load on the Miramar landfill. And it's difficult to do those things when your choice is that it's not that you can just do those and recover the cost for it. If you want to do those, you have to give up something else in the general fund. You have to cut hours at this library. You have to reduce response times when you call 911. You would have to cut maintenance at parks. It's a zero-sum general fund. And so on top of that, the state of California, the legislature, who are also interested in these issues, are passing mandates down to cities to do certain things related to, for instance, composting and food waste. And those legislatures are doing it under the assumption that cities because every city in California does it this way except one, is going to be able to recover the cost of doing those things. The legislature doesn't believe, rightly, that in every place except here, the city council, when they pass this mandate, will have to choose something else to cut, and another essential city service to cut in order to accommodate the mandate of the legislature. And so those are sort of the real world budget implications now that hurt all of us, whether we are paying for trash collection because we live in multifamily housing or a renter and are paying through our rent, or whether we're a single family homeowner and are not being charged for the cost of the service we're receiving. We all suffer from that type of situation. So people tell me not to do this, but I just like to quote Dr. Phil, which, he always asks, how's that working out for you? And so, Sean mentioned some of the frustrations of even, people who are receiving this service without having to pay for it. They get frustrated when they are nickel and dime for bins. They want more recycling pickup, they're not gonna get it. And then again, all of us with city services being as they are, it's not working out for us. So I wanted to maybe wrap up at least this portion with something of a call to action, because there's obviously a lot of thoughtful people in this room who took time out of the middle of your day to hear. I was gonna say boring speaker, but I'm talking about myself, not these two.
We're fun.
Yeah, they were much more fun and engaging. But to engage in this sort of somewhat wonky topic. And the problem with the other side, Lauren mentioned his name. I'll just call him a radio host to be named later. But it's easy to sort of grab people with this is a garbage tax. This is double taxation. This is greedy people trying to take your money. And and unfortunately there's a segment of our voters who sort of grasp onto that. And so I would just ask those of you who are interested in this subject, those of you who support this reform, please engage with your friends, family, networks, next door, if you dare to engage on that platform. Holy cow, that's dangerous sometimes. Because it takes effort to engage people in a thoughtful way on this, and appreciate anybody who has the time and interest to do that. So with that, I think we'll turn it over to you, Kim, and we'll take some questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much to all three of you. We do have a number of questions. The first one is for the council president. If Measure B does not pass, what will happen? What will the city council do?
I'll cry. We will have to make tough decisions. The state bill that was referenced a number of times up here, SB 1383, there is a state mandate in terms of organics collection. I'd encourage you, the Voice of San Diego environment report written by Mackenzie Elmer last week laid out some of the costs associated with the implementation of SB 1383, what it's already cost the city, what it projects to cost the city in the future. And as Mike said, we're going to face tough decisions. I don't want to scare anyone, but there's already a structural budget deficit to the tune of about $125 million. And I don't know anyone, I never meet a constituent who says, we are overwhelmed with services. We're just drowning in services. Too many services. Rein back the services. That doesn't happen, right? As it is, it's difficult to provide folks with what they want and expect. And that is because, and this is I truly believe this, I think that San Diego residents for a couple generations now have been lied to about what it actually costs to run a major city. And there's been some politicians who I think have to Mike's point, have used that in a pretty cynical way, have to undermine the belief in government, and it has an effect of almost being like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? When we starve local government of resources and say that local governments can't deliver, the government can't get the job done, that we just basically should just pack it up and go home, dissolve the city, what's the point? it gets really hard to deliver those services. And all this at the same time, we're stripping workers of the compensation that they had received, of their retirement benefits. It's no wonder why it's difficult to hire people to do the work that has to be done to run any city, let alone one of the biggest cities in the country. So what will happen if this doesn't pass? We're going to have to figure out how to piece together, how to continue to piece together a puzzle that's missing essential pieces. And that's, I think the result of that is one that we don't want. We've done what we can up until this point, but that structural budget deficit isn't going away. We have major infrastructure needs. Folks want to maintain and if not expand library hours and services. I don't need to tell you all the things that you want that you're not getting now. I'll just say it's going to be really difficult for us to have those conversations if we continue to starve the general fund from $50+ million per year on an annual basis.
Sorry. Mike.
I didn't know where I was going. I just.
Sorry. Are any of you aware of the rationale behind the 1980s amendments only providing free trash pickup to single-family homes?
Mike, you're the closest to the generation that has been involved in that decision.
Wow. I'm not specifically aware, but I'll take this opportunity just to digress slightly on topic. The 1980s were was Pete Wilson as mayor for the first part of that decade, and to Sean's point, and former Governor Senator Wilson's not here to defend himself, but that was an era of where the big lie began to San Diegans, that we're San Diego, we can do things better, cheaper, we don't need to have fees and cost recovery devices for things like trash pickup. We don't need to have the same level of taxation or business license fees or franchise fees that every other city in California does. We can do it for cheaper. Well, as it turns out, they couldn't. They started borrowing from the pension fund at that point. They started borrowing from employees' retiree health benefits at that point. And those things came home to roost a few decades later. And so, anyway, I'm not trying to be I'm a recovering politician, not a current politician, but I'm dodging the question only because I don't know the specific answer, but it was in that era where red meat was constantly thrown to San Diegans about how we don't need to charge you, and it was codified in the 80s. Does anybody have a better answer?
I don't have a better answer, but I have a guess because I did read a lot of the history before I wanted to make sure everything I was saying was true up here, of course. Sometimes we pass laws for things that we're already doing. That's not just San Diego. That's something that happens. So when in 1919 they decided that the city was responsible for the collection and the pickup, and then the city never chose to implement a fee, this could have been just a win for voters. That is always a possibility because it looks really good for the people who were in office at the time to be able to say, we're going to guarantee that we're not going to charge single-family homes while they were already not charging them. So I am not saying that that is the reason, but it's a really easy win for people who want to get reelected.
If Measure B doesn't pass, will reduced services affect tourism and convention business?
So again, I'm gonna go nearby this question, but not head on. One of the things, and Sean, the council president, referenced this, is when visitors come to San Diego, if they come here in the form of Airbnb or vacation home rental, they're getting services that neither they nor their host are paying for. When visitors come here and stay in a hotel, they're paying much less in hotel taxes than visitors to Los Angeles or San Francisco or Anaheim or all the cities we compete with. And so even among our visiting population, San Diego has a history of not recovering the costs of even the visitor industry. And part of that is because, as implicit in the question, we care about the visitor industry. It's an important part of San Diego's economy. We have a very diversified economy, but tourism and visitors and convention business in particular is a significant driver of everything from city revenues to economic activity. So there's been this notion from elected officials that we can't kill that goose that lays that golden egg. We gotta treat visitors and give them discounts too, essentially. And so so to the extent if this measure doesn't pass, and as Sean answered the previous question, the city has to make tough decisions, it's going to affect everybody, including visitor services, including resident services and citizens, city workers, and everybody else.
I also just want to say that if this doesn't pass, we're going to see more of what's already happening. We're already seeing issues with trash pickup. We're already nickel and diming people. This not passing does not change any of that. So they can continue to digress and get worse, but it's already happening. There is already staff at the city that is spread thin. We are already not funding these services. So it's going to get worse, but this not passing doesn't change that. That's why it's important that we do pass it, because we want to, one, ensure that these services don't get any worse, but also make them better and make them worth it.
Thank you. I'd like to combine two questions now. Residents that are living in multifamily housing and on private streets, are they currently using a private hauler for their trash services? And the second part, when this passes, would they have the option of contracting with the city for service?
There you go, young guy.
Thank you, sir. So it's going to get real muddled very quickly because the system right now is confusing. The reality is that most, not all, but most single-family homes receive the trash pickup without any fee associated. Some, if they're in a gated community or in other rare circumstances, might be paying. There are multifamily properties that might have been on a lot that might be on a lot that was formerly a single-family property. They do get city services. So in other words, it's all over the place. It's kind of the Wild West. If this were to pass, we wouldn't be changing necessarily the structure of private haulers providing services to some and the city providing to others. We would be ensuring, we've actually strengthened the language to ensure that city workers, in other words, that the work that's done by the city now would not be contracted out. We think that that's important. We think it's important that our city workers know that they can depend on their jobs at the city. We believe that this is an essential city function that the city should be involved in. We also know that there's private haulers who have long relationships with different property owners and different communities. We're not trying to disrupt that. I think we'll have more flexibility in the future to perhaps create a more organized system, but we're not trying to get to that yet. First things first, Measure B is about, again, untying the city's hands so that we can start to have a mature adult conversation around what trash pickup should look like in the 8th biggest city in the country in a way that doesn't completely deplete the general fund and force the city into really, really tough decisions while also being objectively unfair.
Thank you. Another two-part question. Can you tell us how much other cities charge residents for trash collection? And opponents have said that this change will cost residents up to $80 a month. How do you respond to their claim?
And Lauren, if you want to add, based on the research you've done, so it really varies, and that's not me dodging the question, that's a reality. That's why we have to have that conversation with you all about what sort of services you want. If you want to maintain recycling every other week, if you want everything to be done as is, you just don't want that huge hit on the general fund, well, we're probably looking at $20 to $25 a month here in the city of San Diego. Other cities range from 15, and I'll even quote the highest, San Jose, for the highest level of service, because they offer different levels of service and different size cans. For the highest level of service with the biggest cans, it's $150 per month. I don't see, you opt into that though. That's a thing that folks opt for. I was actually talking to the city council president from San Jose, because I was like, what are you, is it like, are you delivering gold as you pick up the trash? What are you doing? And he actually didn't know what he was paying. It's on his property tax bill. And then he pulled it up and he showed me that there's these different levels. So that's like the, on the low end to the far high end. And a lot of this is gonna be based on what folks actually want, right? And I think an important component of that is realizing that by way of Measure B, we would have flexibility, not just to create a system overall that is more customized to the wants of San Diegans, but perhaps even tailored to the individual's wants and needs as well. All of that gets put on the table if we pass Measure B. None of it's on the table unless we do.
Yeah, so again, I mentioned City of La Mesa, it's in that like $20-ish range. And we have trash pickup and recycle pickup and green pickup every week on the same day. And let me tell you, it's very convenient whenever I have house sat, or I'm a dog sitter, dog sat for anyone in the city of San Diego. It's really tough to remember to put those bins out on different days. So that's a convenience that we are happy to pay for in the city of La Mesa. Other things that I mentioned earlier was the variable rate pricing. So you pay based on how much garbage that you output. So it's an option again, but it can't be a part of the conversation unless we pass Measure B. So there are all kinds of options. And again, the city council will have to take a vote to move forward on this. Even after all of the consulting and research and speaking to communities, there will still be a lot of choices to make. This is not assigning a fee, this is not assigning a tax. It is giving options that we can talk about what's fair for San Diego based on the size of the city, based on the services people want, and also potentially based on how much you throw away and the incentive to use compost bins and recycle. And again, it's a really easy measure to support because it's an easy way to support the environment and sustainability. There's a lot of tougher ways that the city of San Diego is dealing with and is going to have to continue to deal with, that everyone across the country is with the environment. So why not say yes to easy steps like this in the right direction?
Thank you. Will there be provisions to help low-income people and seniors pay for trash pickup, especially since Prop 218 does not allow this? Is that correct?
Who's the question from? Do you want to elaborate?
Right. It's my observation that Prop 218 provides for uniform cost. Okay, everybody pays the same rate. So under the Prop 218 provision, there's no subsidies for low income. The case in point is the water.
Yeah, and similar to water, there are programs for lower income individuals to enter into to receive assistance. So I'd say I think that's a good analogy, and just like we've built programs for folks with water, we can build programs for trash.
Right. The point being that programs will have to be built.
Correct, and I mean I think that given where I'll speak for myself and then reference what I've seen from my colleagues on the council. We take the impacts of our decisions on low-income individuals, seniors, on fixed incomes about as serious as we possibly could. We prioritize equity on a very, very consistent basis, And so I don't imagine a world where we start imposing fees without having taken into consideration and having ensured that the folks who need assistance receive assistance.
Thank you. How will short-term rental properties like Airbnbs be charged for their extra trash?
Well, the first thing, let's acknowledge that we're going to be able to collect, recover cost, right? That's what we're going to be able to do with respect to Airbnbs. And I think that how that is done is largely up to the conversation that we have with you all after Measure B passes, because it could take another number of different forms. I know that, in several of our responses, it seems like there's details that we have not thought about yet or aren't sorted out. And it's not that we haven't thought about them, this isn't the point that we make that decision. So if we tried to spell it, just be really prescriptive as to everything we wanted to do with trash collection and built that into the ordinance, we'd be right back where we are today in an unknown amount of time. Maybe it's 10 years from now, maybe it's 20 years from now, we don't know. We don't know when the next state mandate's going to come. In other words, it's important that we create some flexibility, and we create that flexibility by amending the ordinance in the way that we have, which allows the policymakers of the city to work with the residents to build a system based on your wants, your needs, but is also adaptable. Because, I've referenced SB 1383, the state organics law. That's the law that we're dealing with today. I don't think it'd be reasonable to assume that the state is going to require less of cities when it comes to diverting waste. And so it's important that we maintain that flexibility. Any lack of reference to an exact fee or the design of the program is not for lack of consideration or a desire to pull a fast one on voters. It's to ensure that we don't lock ourselves into, basically take ourselves out of one box and lock us into a new one. That's not good policymaking.
I'll also just say our businesses within the city of San Diego are already paying for garbage pickup. So this is simply a loophole. Airbnbs, VRBOs, they have a lot of loopholes, and that's something that our council, especially Councilmember Campbell, have worked really hard to close these loopholes, to make it fair, to make sure that we have housing. This is a whole other conversation. But the point is that Airbnbs are businesses. They are not homes. They are often in residential areas, and sometimes parts of the year are people's homes, but this is a loophole that we are simply trying to close. Businesses are already paying for trash pickup. They are a business, therefore they should be paying for trash pickup. It really is that simple.
Thank you. What properties are eligible in the ordinance, and what will be the status of rentals and condos after the ordinance is passed?
Sure.
Who asked that question? Again? I feel like you're here with a job to do. Seems you're on a mission. What do you mean by eligible?
What is the plan for trash pickup for rentals and condos? We know the single-family residents are part of the ordinance. What is the plan for rentals and condos?
Yeah, this doesn't change that. I would expect that the difference that they would see is better overall city services. Better overall city services because the general fund will have been replenished to a certain extent from what it is now.
Right.
Yeah.
In other words, non-trash services will be better.
Correct. Although in a more tangential way, I think that and it starts to become a little bit speculative, but let's say that the community wants bulky item pickup on a regular basis, and that is something that the city starts to establish and that we can afford to do because of being able to recover cost. I mean, I think there's benefits there. But this all becomes speculative because I don't know what folks are going to say that they want.
I think I would also just reiterate something the council president said earlier, which I think is known. It's such a patchwork right now. I live in Ocean Beach. I live in a single-family home. I have trash pickup provided for me by the city. Right across the alley from me is I think it's a 4-unit. It's not a single-family home, but it is on a lot that is apparently at one time zoned as single-family, and it's 4 different units all connected, and they have 8 city pickup trash bins out there. Literally 150 feet north is a more traditional sort of 6-pack apartment building with 6 spots in front. They use commercial pickup from Republic Services. And again, I'm 150 feet the other way, it's like a family home. So it's sort of all over the place right now. And I think the key is to provide a mechanism to standardize that a little more, to recover the costs of that pickup, whether that is being used as an Airbnb or whether it's technically zoned this or that, but it's being used in the same way as this one, but it's being charged differently. Again, none of that is touchable at the moment. So I think the key is to dig in.
And again, as someone who pays for trash pickup and lives in a condo, there are options, especially within HOAs or within apartment complexes, that they could just tack this on to your bill instead of it coming out of, instead of you giving it directly to the city. There's all kinds of options that not just our city council are going to have to consider, but also owners of these properties and homeowners associations. There's a lot of different ways that this could go, and again, we're not at the point of making those decisions. It is only speculative, as the council president said. So there's all kinds of ways this could look like.
All right, last question, and I'll let each of you speak if you want to get a last word in. Would you tell us more about what the campaign needs for help?
So, as I said earlier, I think first and foremost, it's engagement on a person-to-person neighborhood level. I think there is a campaign going on. There's a way to donate to that campaign. There's a website that I believe is going to be live today. Oh, look at this! The League of Women Voters is on it. Yes on Measure B. There you go. .com.
Measure B.
So you can refer people to there. I think there's ways of getting involved. We have yard signs being delivered today. Yes on B. You may note the logo there. You see that B? So it looks like a bin. Isn't that pretty cool? Huh? So yeah, isn't that nice? Very good. You've been staring at that and didn't realize it. There you go. But I think that engagement is most important. And as I said earlier, it's sort of it's easier politics on the no side of B, more sort of pandering politics, and you just need to raise the thoughtfulness and the information just a little bit, and people get it left, right, and center that this is broken, needs to be fixed. This is the first step, and let's do that. So that'd be my answer.
I have so many things running through my head, but what I want to really make sure you leave with, most people who are going to be voting are not you all. They are not as informed as you. They often choose not to be as informed. Most people, when they see a measure or a proposition and they don't really understand it, they will vote no. I believe that most people who vote no on this measure, it's not because they're against it, it's not because they think it's a bad idea, it's because they don't know what it is. So again, like Mike said, talk to your neighbors, talk to your family members that live in town. I have one of my best friends from college here. Talk to your people, because it's easy to understand. I hope we've done a good job of explaining that there's a lot of decisions that will come later, but voting yes on Measure B, it's easy to do, it's easy to understand, so make sure they're aware of it, because it's going to come down to people understanding what it is, not I don't think it's going to be something that people are against once they understand it. So just make sure you do that. Again, the chamber, we are committed, I continue to say it, all of us will continue to say it, to engaging with the city because they are committed to engaging with us. Afterwards, to make sure that we're not paying $150 a month unless you choose to, and that it's fair and equitable to everyone in the city of San Diego.
Thanks, Lauren. I think those were great ideas. The only thing that I would add to that is to tailor your message when you're talking to people, right? So I mentioned the different values that are driving my desire to see Measure B pass, my commitment to equity, my commitment to seeing environmental progress, and my commitment to providing excellent services to folks. So your audience, your family member or your neighbor. If they've been very, very mad about the broken bin and not being able to get the bin replaced in a semi-sane way, you can say Measure B guarantees bin replacement, right? If there's someone who's committed to the environment, if you're a member of the Sierra Club, you can say, look, this is essential for us achieving our waste diversion goals. And then if you're you're talking to someone who just really believes in fairness, you can explain that this is a two-tier system unlike anything else in the city and unlike any other city around, and it has a huge impact on city, overall city services. So tailoring that message can be really effective. You know your audience best when you're talking to those folks. I assume you know your family members better than I do. So make sure that you're just delivering the message that's most likely to be effective. We're in a good place. The polling has been consistently positive on this, well above water, but we don't want to leave anything to chance, right? It took a lot of effort. It took a lot of effort to get this on the ballot. We were told we shouldn't put it on the ballot. It's there now. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to actually act upon and correct something that's been a problem to the city for a very long time. Let's not miss that opportunity, and you all being out there and being messengers for the cause can certainly help that.
Thanks very much to all three of you. As a reminder, the League does support this measure, so please vote yes on Measure B. Thank you all and have a great afternoon.